I've been managing the internships for the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute almost from the beginning.
Oh, wow.
Looking at building a bridge between initially the social work program and the Institute. So we had the social work interns, and we've had them for several years now. And then the Jerry Malure left a great gift to the university, and we had the Jerry Malure interns. Well, the Jerry Malure interns eventually were moved into the Gene Callahan internship program, and so we changed the name, and now we have two Gene Callahan interns that we send to Springfield every year. As you know, Gene Callahan was a very good friend of Paul Simon's, and when you think about the legacy of Gene Callahan and sending two students to Springfield to work in the House, they work in the Senate. Oftentimes, the Gene Callahan interns work in state agencies. Some of them are interested in healthcare policy, so they work at the Department of Health and Human Services. We've had a Gene Callahan intern at the Department of Transportation. And then we have the Alexander Lane intern. Alexander Lane intern is an internship that's named for the first African American graduate of SIU. And those interns are individuals that one year they're in the House, the next year they're in the Senate.
Oh, wow.
And these interns actually, they have done a phenomenal job. And just to see the growth and the development in those young people over the course of the legislative session. They start in January and they go through the end of the spring legislative session. They write press releases, they do member involvement and engagement, they sit in on committee hearings, they sometimes work late into the night, working when the legislature is in session. So anytime the legislature is in session, those interns are there and they're at the Capitol, they're engaged, they're involved, and they're learning the legislative process up close and personal.
Well, and it was, when we were talking about this before hitting the record button, when I said Isaac, your eyes just lit up.
Yes, Isaac Lettington is just a phenomenal young man and an outstanding intern. And oftentimes interns do such a good job.
Yeah.
And this year managing the internship during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
This was very interesting. And so those interns that we had this year, we managed the Bart Brown interns in conjunction with the political science department. Those individuals typically they work external, so they may work for the trial lawyers, the medical society, external agencies. But this year, because of the pandemic, the Bart Brown interns actually worked at the state capitol. And one of the interesting things about Isaac Lettington is he did such a great job. He was actually asked to stay over the summer, so he's actually in, as we speak, he's in Springfield working for the Senate Democrats.
That's so good. Usually I'll make a reference to somebody that's been on the podcast and connect them through, but Isaac's on my list to get him on the podcast when he's back from from Springfield at some point. It's like, that's just it's just a small world how it all comes together.
It is, and he actually will come back and finish his senior year. The interns, oftentimes, some of them are seniors, some of them are juniors, like Isaac.
Yeah.
So he will finish he'll come back to campus and finish his senior year, but he will have so much experience.
Yeah.
And some of the interns, like Ryan Gugis, for instance, who is now Government Affairs Director for the Department of Professional Regulations, was a Gene Callahan intern, left the Callahan internship, stayed on staff as a staffer, went over to the Department of Revenue as a legislative liaison, and now he's at the Department of Professional Regulations. And so those interns go in, they get just a great understanding of government, how government works, and many of them find their place in government. And so we are building that next generation of individuals from government. And throughout, you can walk around the Capitol and walk across Springfield, the campus between the Stratton building and the Capitol, and just see the number of Salukis that are there that came through our internship programs. And we also have a partnership with the Celia Howard Foundation. And we have two interns here in Carbondale, the Celia Howard Fellowship Program. And that's an internship program or a fellowship program that I manage for the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. And it's a great opportunity for women who are interested in government, who are interested in policy, who are interested in public service.
Yeah.
And we have 2 of those interns each year. And this past year, we had a young woman who's actually a dual degree student, Jerica Griffin, and dual degree student who actually is working on a law degree and a social work degree. And so she was with us for a year. It's a year-long fellowship program, and those individuals actually research a policy issue throughout the year, and primarily interested in issues about women's issues. It could be women's health, it could be pay equity, it could a whole host of different kinds of issues that they research. But we actually have 2 of those individuals every year. Again, having a fellowship at the Institute where they work day in throughout the year. They start in the summer and then they go throughout the calendar year.
It's going to be great when we're finished with the podcast here. One of the art exhibits downstairs right now, my friend AB has installed in the hallways. Jerica is featured in that art exhibit. It'll be wonderful.
Yeah,
to,
because
it'll be wonderful to
and
share.
Celia Howard actually was the interesting story about Celia Howard is Celia Howard actually was accepted into Harvard Law School, and when she got there to start on day 1, they said, "We don't have an application for you. We don't have a applicant for a Celia Howard. We have a Cecil Howard." And that was at a time when women were not being accepted into law schools, and so she didn't have an opportunity to go to law school at Harvard. Even though she was accepted, they pulled it back because she was a female. And so she went on to become a lawyer, a very successful lawyer. And she became a lawyer. She went to school in Illinois. This fellowship program, when she passed away, she left an endowment. And this endowment pays for these fellows. And Jerica and other women have had the opportunity to have this year-long fellowship because of this endowment that was left by Celia Howard.
And is it strictly for the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute, or is it at different institutions throughout the state?
Well, actually, it started off. She left it with the University of Illinois, so they have 14 of them, and they have 14 of them. And because of the work that the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute had done throughout the years, the executive director came to the institute and asked if we would like to manage one of the fellows. And so we got 1 fellow, and we did such a good job. And these young women have done just great in terms of their service and their commitment in giving back. They gave us a second fellow, so now we manage 2 fellows for the Celia Howard Fellowship Program.
Oh, wow.
And that's through the Federation of Women Business Owners.
And just good work grows.
Good work grows, and we don't know how into the future there may be more.
Yeah.
But certainly they are pleased with, and these young women do a fabulous job in terms of the work they do, their commitment to service, their commitment to women. They oftentimes write great papers, policy papers that are distributed on a specific public policy issue, again, with the emphasis on the impact on women.
And I hope that this conversation has an impact for everybody that gets to hear it. Episode 81 of the WTF Carbondale podcast, where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives and tie it all back to this little place we call home, Carbondale, Illinois. And Dr. Linda Baker, thanks. Like I was telling you before, we started recording, just listening to your mind work and the connections that it makes and the way that you're able to just kind of work through the work of others, just be able to see it and know where people are, where they're headed, but where they're landed at now, and just kind of stay plugged into all of those different stories. I really appreciate that. And you were kind of sharing with me as we were scheduling our conversation that you've got a pretty elaborate, interconnected family story in Southern Illinois too. Is that kind of where your interest in the stories of others kind of originates from? Is your own family story?
Well, it's interesting. Coming to Carbondale is like coming home. My parents actually met and married. My parents were both from the South, but after World War II, my father came back home to Murfreesboro. And my mother had moved up from the South with family. And so my parents met in this area, and so moved on to the Metro East area. My father worked in St. Louis as a welder, and he was a barber because he was a barber in the military. He was in the Army. And coming back, I just driving 13 and 127 now, but literally coming down Route 13, and coming here for the Apple Festival and visiting my grandmother, who lived then on what was called D Street. That's now Williams Street in Murfreesboro. So yes, deep family connection. Love the area. I think it's one of the most beautiful places. And when you think about destination places, we've always had in our family just an affinity for Southern Illinois, the people, the culture, the food, the barbecue. It's a beautiful area for beautiful people. And when you think about the university reaching back into the community, one of the things I think that this system's president and this chancellor have talked about a lot is the connectiveness with the community. And I see some of the projects that the university is working on, for instance, with the Irma Hayes Center, trying to rebuild that center and to look at that part of town and to say, what can we do to make sure that there's access to health care, that there are after-school programs. And I have the pleasure of being on one of the systems committees that appointed by the president of the university, looking at different communities and the impact that the university system, the Carbondale campus, the Springfield at the medical school, and the campus in Edwardsville, the connectiveness, trying to make sure that these institutions become a part of the community, that we are not just there in the community, but that we become a part of them and we learn the beat of those communities, and making sure that the policies that they're trying to live out in communities, that when we can, we go in, not to say we're the university and we're here to do everything for you, but we're here to help. We're here to help you with your planning. We have the School of Architecture. We're here to help you talk through some of your infrastructure issues. We have the School of Engineering. We're here to help talk through some of those issues that you're having with infrastructure and transportation and schools and after-school programs. So I'm excited about some of the partnerships, especially with the office that's sitting in Springfield. I spent a lot of my time in Springfield, but that's sitting in Springfield, that's working with all of the 3 campuses, and including the dental school, bringing those resources that the university has to bear to assist with people in those communities.
Oh my gosh, you're really a connect point for so many different things that are value, like public good value generated by the university. Like you talked about being just on committees. Is this something that you expected when you found yourself like even getting into work with the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute early on?
It's interesting because my first conversation was with the former director, Mike Lawrence, and Paul Simon. I had an opportunity to sit down with the two of them, and it was, for me, one of the most fulfilling conversations. One of the first things I remember Paul Simon talking about is when I came here, I was ABD, all but the dissertation. And him saying to me, then in order to be able to be respected on this campus, you need to finish the dissertation. You need to have it done. All but dissertation is probably not going to get it. I'm a United States Senator, and I still have problems walking around on the campus with the academics. He said, you need to finish it. I had come to the university from the Department of Human Services, where I served as the second secretary of that agency. It's the largest agency at the time. It was the largest agency in state government with 20,000 employees. So from a management perspective, I knew how to manage. I managed 20,000 people. I ran all the state-operated facilities as far north as the Evanston area, and then down to Anna. So I knew the scope and the breadth of the state. Had visited and went to the state-operated facilities, had a management team that I worked with that consisted of the directors of a whole host of state agencies, because again, we had combined and made a super agency, because at that time there was a lot of talk about most people that need something need more than one thing. And so if a person needs elder care, if a person needs child care, we need to have a super agency that can work with those individuals on a host of issues: alcoholism and substance abuse, mental health. And so I ran the super agency as the second secretary of that agency. We billions of dollars in budgets, $5.9 billion budget, and 20,000 employees. And so from a management perspective, it was a mammoth task. And so coming here with the background in healthcare and in human services and management and leadership, it was very easy for me. But the conversation that I had with Mike Lawrence and Paul Simon at the time, Paul Simon wanted to look at two things when he talked to me. One was the Metro East area, because having covered that area as a reporter in the Troy area and looking at some of the corruption in the area, he talked about leadership. And he said the only way that we do the right thing with for those individuals in the Metro East area is to build that next generation of leadership. And so we sat down and we devised a plan where we pulled together all of the fraternities in the area, the folks at the Jackie Joyner Kersey Center at the time, and we pulled a group of people together, some of the faith-based leaders as well, and we talked about leadership development and what can you do for these young African-American males from a leadership perspective. And so we started, and we have continued to do work with the Metro East area. And what we've done is we didn't want a one-time shot in the arm, as he said.
Yeah.
If you bring these kids to Carbondale for a conference, what happens when you leave? Who continues to work with them? And so we met with those leaders over probably a course of about 6 months of meetings back and forth. And they said that they all have mentoring programs. And so we said that what we would do for them as an institution is, if you have a mentoring program, you give us one day out of the year, maybe a weekend, where we bring these boys down to Carbondale. Most of them have never been outside. They've not been fishing. They've not been on a nature trail. They're in the city. They don't go out and shoot a bow and arrow. They're not climbing a tree. It just doesn't happen. And so they don't go camping. And we brought them. We brought them to Carbondale. We brought them to the Touch of Nature Environmental Camp. And everybody that spoke to them was a male. Didn't matter race or ethnicity, but it had to be male, to talk about experiencing what kinds of experiences. And sometimes you can't dream what you've never seen. And so talking to them and bringing in different speakers and talking about leadership and development. And then this was a way of supplementing the mentorship that they were doing at the local level. And one of the last things that Paul Simon did before he passed away is he actually attended the very first leadership conference at the Touch of Nature. And I can see him very clearly talking to these young men with this booming voice about leadership and development, and talking to them about their communities and the fact that in order to be able to lift up their community, it was going to have to come from them. They were the next generation, and this was their place, and it was their time. And so when I think about some of those young men, and we keep in touch with many of them, several of them have come to SIU. One I think of specifically is Oliver Keys. Oliver Keys was one of those young men that came to Leadership Weekend, and then he actually now works for Chrysler. He went through the automotive technology program, first in his family.
Wow.
Another young man, Ahmad Hicks, was one of those young men. His father is a member of one of the fraternities. Ahmad Hicks is now on Channel 5 in St. Louis, and he actually was one of those, and he worked at the Simon Institute as a student. And I think about a young man by the name of Shaka Mitchell, who lives in Chicago and is working, who actually owns his own business and has an MBA and actually worked after he finished his undergraduate here in business at SIU, went to Seoul, Korea, and honed his art of the martial arts. And he actually came back to Chicago and opened up a studio right across from the University of Chicago. And so we have many names and many faces of young men that came through that program. And so, as you say, connector, that is one of the things that I pride myself on, is looking at good talent with young people and helping to build, but also connecting with those young people and knowing that it takes a connective group of people to work to build bridges for this next generation.
How did you yourself get into organizing people like this? I mean, was it something that, and I always say this, I'm getting to the point where this is becoming cliche for my questions, but it really is a key component to ask. I mean, was this something that you always felt like you were, pointed towards? Is it something that's been there since a young age, or is it something that you kind of found in young adulthood, like, oh, I'm good at putting people together?
And I think it's a skill. It's about leadership, and the other thing too, as my mom always said, find your talent. And so my talent wasn't playing the piano, and I took many piano lessons, but that just was not. It was my sister's gift. It was not mine. So that it is a gift. It's a gift, and you over time you find a way of working, because most things cannot be done in a silo. I learned that very early on in state government, being an intern in state government. Also, I working as the assistant director of public aid, knowing that when you look at, and I think that's why, in terms of working at the super agency, heading the super agency, being able to pull all those individuals together, understanding that you cannot solve big problems, need more than probably one solution. And the way you do that is to being able to work well with others. And so it was very interesting. The other part of coming to the Institute was that I would be able to also work not only with the political science department, but that I would also be able to work with the School of Medicine. And when we think about Paul Simon passing in December, well, in November, one of the most enlightening things that I saw him do was the conference that we put together. We worked for several months planning a conference, and who knew at the time it would be the last conference that he would do. But the conference was entitled Access to Healthcare in Rural and Underserved Areas. And so one of the things that Paul Simon said at the time was, healthcare, when we think about underserved areas, when we think about the 16 counties, and we think about the south, and we think about everything north of I-80, which most people say that's Southern Illinois, anything north of I-80. But when you think about the healthcare delivery system, and you think about the social determinants of health, and the fact that people in Chicago have transportation issues in some of those underserved areas. They have transportation issues. They may not be the same transportation issues that we have here, but you may have a situation in an urban area where there's a gang territory, and there may be a grocery store, but you can't get to it because you're not allowed to go across a certain area depending upon what's going on at a particular time. Having to take 3 and 4 children on the train if you don't have a car. That's a transportation issue. Just like it is in Southern Illinois, if you don't have a car, trying to get to health care and and food deserts, and trying to get to where there's good food. And so he talked about the fact that we have more in common than we have apart. And so as we think about solving our healthcare issues and healthcare disparities, some of the same healthcare disparities for poor people in underserved areas, they're the same in rural areas. And so he talked about bringing those legislators together, and he talked about bringing those policymakers together, and he did. We had a conference at the Crown Plaza in Springfield, and it was very widely attended. And it was interesting because as one of the people that had to help get the list of speakers, and we gave the speakers to him, and he approved a list of speakers that we gave him, and he said, now, what you need to tell this list of speakers is, in order to speak on the podium, they have to stay after the conference is over. Because we're not going to have a situation where we have a conference and everybody leaves. I want to sit around the table with those individuals, along with the dean of the medical school, and we're going to come up with a plan based upon what we hear from the participants in the audience and based upon the research that they've gathered. And I looked and I said to Mike Lawrence, that's going to be pretty hard. I said, because most people want to come to a conference and speak and leave.
Yeah.
And he said, well, we need to find people that can come to a conference and sit around a table and come up with some solutions. And the only person that didn't have to stay, that got a pass, was Senator Durbin. So he didn't stay. He was a keynoter, and he did not have to stay. But everyone else stayed. We had doctors. We had from across the state. We had legislators from across the state. We had other practitioners, policymakers, researchers that spoke at that conference, and they stayed. And we came up with a plan that, and when you think about telehealth and people talking about telehealth, that was a part of the plan.
Wow.
Back then. And so many of those things on that list. And I've heard over the years, I've seen that brochure that came from that conference with that list of about 16 to 20 recommendations. I've seen that on the desk of legislators. I've seen it on the desk of policymakers from across the state. And so when you talk about legacy building and connecting, and when you talk about connector, me being a connector, Paul Simon was the ultimate connector. He believed in connecting people. He believed in working with students. I was actually talking with a person in Springfield the other day who's actually on the House Republican staff, oddly enough, but he was in Paul Simon's class. And he talked about Paul Simon's leadership and his ability to work with others, but also his ability to develop people. And so if I want to emulate anything from him, it is the connectivity, because he definitely was a connector. And he was a developer. And he was one that, regardless of race or party, that knew how to work with people to get things done. And so, as I said earlier in the podcast, I'm excited about this time for this university. I'm excited to have a systems president who is a connector, who has said to those of us who are on the various committees, whether it be about diversity, whether it be about working with the community, he has a keen sense of what's going on in communities. He's talking about health care, because that's first and foremost on the minds of many, especially with the pandemic. Get involved in these communities, work with these communities. We are looking at the 4 pillars that the Illinois Black Caucus, Legislative Black Caucus has when they talk about health care. They talk about economic development and transportation. We're looking at the leadership that they have provided, and we're actually working with communities to help build those communities. And what better way for an academic institution that sits in most of these, in Carbondale, we're the largest employer. You know, you have SIH and you have us. And so we need to connect with the folks at SIH to improve the health care of people in this community. And I think we have a charge and a challenge to do that. And I think we have a president and a chancellor that really is pushing us to really work with these communities.
What's it like being able to see things that were on a list that you helped build, over 15 years ago, and then watch them over time become implemented, not just become policy on paper, but actions based in the policy that has been developed?
It's a very good feeling. And as I said, to see that brochure, to still see people looking at that brochure. And, we're into like 2.0 now. We actually have had several conferences after that. And Dr. Samir Vora and I have been working very closely together from the School of Medicine. He and Dr. Cruz have really come together and said, okay, we're going to now look at the same kind of approach. And we're approaching it in the same way. We've had a whole host of meetings where we're working with communities and bringing people in to talk about health care, to talk about what the School of Medicine can do to help to improve the access to health care in these areas, looking at and building upon that work that was done 15 years ago, because we know things have changed. There have been many things, especially with this pandemic. This pandemic has shed a light on many of the things that we already knew. We knew that poor people in certain areas had bad health care. Even though the health care was there, they were not going for various reasons. And so maybe and the need for community health workers to meet people where they are in their communities, to be able to get them to the services that they need and to find out why they're not going to those services. We know that we talk about the food deserts and bringing food to people and being that connector for the community, I think is something that we've known for a long time. But this pandemic has shown us that it's not enough for me to take care of myself if my next door neighbor isn't, because if my next door neighbor has the virus and we go to the same grocery store, we're in the same areas, we breathe the same air. And so it's not enough to just take care of your street and your community, but it's to be connected to and to look at our communities as a whole.
What do you think about kind of the national dialogue that has started to embrace some of these components that you've been looking at for years and years and years now? I mean, where people are starting to acknowledge the value and the need for social work, not just as this standalone component, but this integrated function into many of the different services that people have to take advantage of. Same deal with food resilience and just being able to localize or sustain your food sources, because that hierarchy of needs, food's pretty high up there.
Yeah. And all of those, absolutely. And the fact that I can remember finishing my doctoral degree and actually having some discussions and having an opportunity to meet David Satcher, was a Surgeon General. And one of the most profound things that I heard him say is, there is no health without mental health. And when I became Secretary of Human Services, we had buttons that said, there is no health without mental health. Wow. And so looking at mental health parity and looking at building mental health into healthcare. And we know that we have, for a long time, we've shied away from even addressing the issues of mental health. And we have seen, as a result of this pandemic, we've seen children that are going through issues with depression, people that didn't realize they had anxiety before, they have anxiety issues now. And so dealing with mental health, and when we talk about law enforcement, and oftentimes, police officers not having the right training, how to deal with mental health, people that have mental health issues. So some of those are some of the issues that we have worked on and looked at for a very long time. And those are some of the issues now, as you say, they are on the national agenda right now, just in terms of overall health.
Well, and it's any one person can look at their own silo and say, oh, well, I'm here because I'm here. But the reality is there are so many folks across an ecosystem of lawmakers and workers and policy writers and so on and so forth that have done the work to get us to this point in these conversations. It's not just, oh well, it was an idea one day and now it's here and we're going to push for this policy. It's like it's already been in the works. Like
right. It's been debated, it's been discussed, and sometimes what is the positive that comes out of the tragedy? Yeah. And when we think about many of these communities, we knew that obesity was an issue. Yeah. We knew that if high blood pressure and hypertension is an issue. We know that people that don't get health screenings oftentimes there are other issues that come about, because if we would have just got that screen, we would have known earlier that something came up, that we had a specific issue. But I think, the pushing for community health workers to go into communities, to work with individuals, and then, looking at the disparities that do exist and recognizing them for what they are. Not saying if a person has a Medicaid card, because that was one of the things when I was Secretary of Human Services, people were saying, well, we've expanded health care, and so all these people have a Medicaid card, so they're good. Well, but do they have a doctor that takes that card? There are a lot of doctors that over the years that wouldn't take Medicaid. that close their panels to Medicaid individuals. Children we know need certain screens for their dental care. We know that over the years, we've done a lot of policy changes over the years to make sure that those dental screenings that were done, that was one of the things that we worked on, actually that Paul Simon and Mike Lawrence worked on before I came, was they had just started the work of getting the dental hygiene program to do screenings for children in the community. That's outreach. That is connecting. That's connecting the community where we sit with the people that need us.
Yeah.
There has to be a bridge between the two. And so the Simon Institute was very instrumental in helping to make that connection with the dental school, making sure that kids in Carbondale that needed dental work, as well as adults, could get that work done on that campus through the hygiene program. And we know that with dental care, you can find out a lot. You can find out about hypertension and so many other things just by looking at your teeth. And so
Really?
that whole piece of connectiveness and being able to connect people with other people, but also to change some of the policies. You know, we are the Policy Institute and actually helping individuals to make those connections that sometimes communities don't have the resources to be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it, right? And the value in just having an advocate, what it means to have some folks that are capable, willing, and connected in a way that allows them to do that on behalf of so many thousands of people. Like, that's what we've moved away from in terms of, well, what is representation anymore?
Right. And also, being, when you think about legislators, not only what might help Carbondale and Cairo with the Senator Fowler and a Terry Bryant is also probably going to help a Senator Chris Belt and a LaToya Greenwood.
Yep.
But it's going to also help, they're in the Metro East, but it's going to also help a legislator on the west side, LaShawn Ford in Chicago, but it's going to also help a Jahan Gordon in Peoria. And so when we think about good public policy is about connecting. It's about leadership, and it's about making good connections, and also having a conversation and finding out what individual communities need. And I think as I think about this past year, and that's why I'm really proud of the Legislative Black Caucus and the work that they've done, because this year they spoke to communities. And it was tough in talking to many of them. It was really tough as they really tried to hammer out and work with their colleagues from across the state to talk about housing and health care. And there is a connection between housing and health care and criminal justice and economic development. There's a connection between all of those. And we have the infrastructure within SIU, our institution, to be able to be pivotal in all of those. Now, we can't do it. It's not like we have an army or resource, but we can be of assistance to those. And I think when we think about the Office of Community Engagement that's going to come in Springfield, that is actually open, this Office of Community Engagement, but also that office will be working directly with the campuses. And I think that is, for me, one who has in her mind and sees the vision of how things connect together and how you bring all these resources to bear to assist the community. I'm really excited about that work and what it's going to mean for communities.
Is it heartening with years into this work to see kind of the spread out again? Started at a center point, right, with a handful of folks through the Public Policy Institute, but has blossomed and bloomed into the entirety of the system, this interdisciplinary work, and really finding more folks and engaging more folks in leadership roles throughout the system that see the value in this interdisciplinary work. Not just each school is its own silo, but each school is its own producer of just one thread of yarn that will spin together with all of the others.
Oh, absolutely. And when you think about, you have other universities that are part of big systems. And if the system works, all the parts are healthy.
Yeah.
If they work together and they coordinate and they collaborate. And I've had, as I said, I've had the opportunity recently to work on several of these committees and to see the energy and the synergy among the people on those campuses, to see Dr. Garish in Springfield and to talk to him on and to see how he is pulling together the best collective thinking on these campuses and to talk about what we can do for communities. And that is, I think that's how SIU grows. That's how we grow our student base.
Yeah.
You know, when people in Carbondale and people in, and I know we're doing some work now with trying to get the folks from Carbondale and surrounding areas, stay home. You know, you don't have to go far away, stay home.
Yeah.
And then other people that, you know, that may be in St. Louis and in other areas come. And then trying to get people who are graduates and alums, send your kids. And so when you think about what is going on, that's about connections too.
Yeah.
It's about connecting back with those individuals who may have been here at a very different time when there were lots and lots of students and there was a lot going on. And I think we're building back toward that, but doing it in a systematic way as opposed to a siloed approach.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to require, I don't know exactly what to call it. I'd have to look at my emails to reference it, but something having to do with the Alumni Association, connecting some key alumni with the deans of the newly organized schools, and then finding ways to communicate within that. So I mean, it's happening at all levels too. It's not just like these are conversations that are occurring behind closed doors and it's a plan and we're going to release it and whatever else. These are all actionable things occurring from the ground up, from the student that is just stepping off of, you know, the graduation dais to the folks who are looking at this going, all right, well, it is time to send my kids back to college. Let's send them on down to SIU. And you said one of your kids is 19 now. Have you been going through not necessarily the SIU talk, but you've been going through all the college moves and all that, and figuring out what the...
That one's in college. I have a 17-year-old that I'm doing that with now. I have a senior in high school that is really trying to figure out where he wants to go, what he wants to do. He's thinking about whether or not he wants to play football or does he want to come here? Where does he want to go?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, at this point he's still trying to make a decision. So I think he's an open book at this point.
Yeah.
But, you know, letting individuals know about the resource. And I saw that the two throwers in the Olympics the other day that are Salukis. So
it helps out.
It helps out.
just to be visible. I mean, it's cool, you know, notable alumni and all of that other components. But this, just going through that process with your kids gives you a special kind of insight that allows you to understand and put yourselves in the shoes of all of the other parents and all of the other kids that are having to make these decisions about where to go. And is SIU that right place for me to find myself? Is it the right place for me to pursue my passions? Is it the right place for me to change my mind? That's quite the...
Right.
And I thought that was another component, as we were talking about before the podcast, that where you had changed your mind as well on, you know, the side of medicine that you wanted to be on, the hands-on actual application of medicine in the moment of need versus the policy that directs that activity in the moment of need.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So as I mentioned to you, I did two internships as an undergraduate. One was at St. Mary's Hospital in East St. Louis. And that internship was a big awakening for me. I had done one before at Scott Air Force Base, and I did it in their hospital, very calm hospital. It was great. It was very slow paced, no trauma or anything. Well, at the time, St. Mary's was a level 1 trauma.
Ooh, wow.
And I was taking a class at Belleville Area College over the summer, and it was an EMT class. And what I saw in that emergency room, level 1 trauma at that time, I decided this is not the place for me.
Yeah.
I went back and quickly went into the administration and leadership and policy. because the hands-on was definitely not the place for me.
What does having a level 1 trauma center now in Carbondale mean for us?
It's absolutely, it's great for the community.
Yeah.
That you can take care of many of those emergency needs here, that you're not flying people to St. Louis, that you actually have a trained and ready workforce here. And I'm excited about many of the medical programs, the expansion of programs, having the nursing program back in Carbondale. I know there were many nurses that were driving to Edwardsville and other places from Heron and Carbondale to go to nursing school, and they can now go to nursing school here. And that's going to help because you're going to need those nurses for that level 1 trauma center. So that is exciting for this community. I know SIH has done a great job just in terms of, again, they are connectors. Rex Buddy and Woody Thorne, I've worked with both of them over the years. They are connectors. They, like Paul Simon, see a problem and they connect with others in order to make things happen in the community. And so the work that SIH has done over the years and the partnerships that they've forged, and then the needs assessments that they've done to see what the needs are in this community, I think means a lot.
Yeah. I mean, just knowing what your issues are, right? I mean, it's like you'd mentioned earlier, it's one thing to have the backing to go, pursue and obtain the resource. It's a whole other thing to understand how to chart that course. I'm in the midst of it right now. I'm lucky that a community health worker has been able to guide me through. Nathan, go establish your primary care. Nathan, quit ignoring different health issues, because you're not just somebody in your 20s who's concerned about, will I be able to pay a medical bill or not now? Like, there's just no choice. Like, you have to follow through with it when you start hitting a certain point, regardless the apprehension of, well, how much is this healthcare really going to cost me in the end? Which I imagine just putting efforts in place to help guide people through the healthcare process has yielded a world of positive outcomes.
Oh, absolutely, and helping people to find a medical home.
Yeah.
And the issues of cultural competency are real. Individuals oftentimes don't go to the doctor because they may want a doctor that looks like them, or some people may want a male doctor, some might want a female doctor. Finding a medical home for yourself. And I think having those community health workers that are out there that are connecting with, and the other thing that has really helped healthcare in a large way is the managed care companies working with and managing the care of individuals, as opposed to an individual just going from place to place, being able to find a healthcare home where you can go, and if you need specialists and others, getting that care that way as opposed to the emergency room.
What do you see as kind of the next steps in healthcare policy, whether it's statewide or nationally, that are just kind of, this is where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years, having known what the past couple of decades have looked like, getting us to where we are now?
Well, I think with what we have been shown in terms of the pandemic, I think there's going to be more attention to prevention. There's going to be more attention to the whole person, the whole individual in healthcare. Gone, I think, are the days where people are afraid to talk about the fact that they have mental health issues. We look at the Olympics the other day with Simone Biles saying, "I am in crisis. I'm not going to get on that beam at this time. I'm having a mental health crisis," and being able to say that, I think that is a huge step. That's one of the things that we've talked about at the Simon Institute as we talk about different policies. For 15 years, that Paul talked about that mental health in jail, in jails. He actually talked a lot about that and even wrote about the fact that for many people, it's sad that you're incarcerated and you're getting better medical care while you're in prison than you do when you get out. You're getting continuity of care. And when you get out, or you're managed on your medications while you're incarcerated, and when you get out, there's no continuity of care. And so I think as we move forward and see all of the disparities in healthcare, that we knew they were there.
Yeah.
We looked the other way. But I think, one of the things that often, women have talked about, and especially women of color, in terms of healthcare and providers not listening, the pain threshold and the number of African, when we talk, my dissertation, I looked at healthcare disparities years ago when I did my doctoral dissertation, and looking at healthcare disparities and looking at the number of mothers that died at birth, and disproportionately those are poor mothers, but even greater, to a greater extent, they're mothers of color. And so looking at healthcare disparities, I think the lens is off, the curtain is back. We know that the disparities exist. And I think as we talk about advocacy, we're going to see more in terms of advocacy. When I worked for at that particular time, when Barack Obama was then, when he was Senator Obama in the House in the Illinois State Senate, I actually had the opportunity to know him, because at that particular time, I was the assistant director at public aid, that's in the public aid days. And one of the interesting things back then, his whole piece was healthcare. And at that time, it was about trying to get more people on Medicaid, the expansion of Medicaid. He talked a lot about it. And we are there now. We have expanded. Illinois was one of the first states to expand Medicaid, and that was a big piece for him in the Senate, was health care and expansion of Medicaid, making sure that individuals had access. When he got to Congress, he continued to fight that fight, and of course he fought it when he became president, and continued to fight the fight about health care expansion. Well, now that we've expanded health care, more people have health care. We need to make sure that people understand how to utilize the healthcare delivery system to their benefit, and that we devise a healthcare delivery system that is, and it's a hard thing to do, but that is not biased about who people are that walk through the door, that all individuals that walk through the door of a provider, that they're listened to, that they're heard, and that their needs are met. And that we understand that there is a link between healthcare and education. There's a link and a connection between your healthcare and where you live and your environment. All of those things impact your health. And so as we move forward to continue to build a healthcare delivery system, we have to look at it from a holistic perspective.
Do you think people overcomplicate this stuff when it really is just, here's a handful of the key components about getting you the funding, then the access, then the transportation, and then the treatment, that really we want to too often say, oh, well, here's all the reasons why we can't deliver on a need for somebody, when really it would just be much easier to say, well, here's the 4 steps that we need to take, and then you'll prevent us from having greater societal issues down the road.
Human nature being what it is, we definitely always complicate things. But I think that I think as we look at individuals, and each individual situation is different. Because I may live in a specific area and I just can't get there. So how do you provide me with the transportation? It may be out there, but I may have a mental health issue and I'm not getting there. And that's why I think these community health workers, there was a time when people didn't want people to come to their homes. When that was a bad thing. But I think now we are awakening to the fact that it's going to take all hands on deck, and it's going to take a combination of things to be able to solve this. And healthcare is not just a building, and it's not just one thing. Healthcare is all of those things: the education, the economic development, all of those, the transportation, all of that. It is an all-encompassing piece.
And that just continues to just hold up the value of yourself as a connector. I get it. It's so. Like I said before the conversation, I don't know if I had said it off the top or not as well, but just seeing and hearing the way in which you're able to put these things together is just inspiring. It really is. And this is one of those conversations that I'm gonna cherish. I was like, oh man, I was telling Allie this just a couple days ago. I was like, man, the interview with John Jackson was one of the best that I feel like I've gotten in thus far. And then you're coming in and blowing the doors off. You're like, get out of here, Nathan. Hush. No.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate it on behalf of the Institute, and then on behalf of the students. As we started earlier, we talked about the internship programs, and we now have a list, and we have an alumni group of interns and fellows that have gone through the Institute, and I think as we continue to build the Institute and we have a host of great speakers that the Institute has lined up. John has brought some great speakers in that have, and hopefully once the pandemic is over, some of those people will come and be here with us in live. I remember Paul Simon bringing in people like Walter Cronkite and Coretta Scott King and some of those individuals, and I see the people that we have now that are coming in via Zoom and the technology. And I think being able to connect the students and also the SIU community to the caliber of speakers has been something that has really been helpful to the Institute during a time where, when you think about what do you do during a pandemic? How do you get students involved? How do you still bring in some of the best speakers? Well, you use technology to bring them in. And so I think that has been a big piece for the Institute, and also a way of us sending out the links to those alumni that we have. And we have a strong alumni base of just interns that have gone through the Institute. And I've recently we actually every year when the internship program starts up, we'll start up again in January. So the internships go from January, the Springfield interns, January through May. And before they start, we always have either a conference call or we have a Zoom call with prior interns to kind of tell them, this is what you need to look forward to. If you're a junior, you'll come back to campus, but you will certainly come back with a rich set of experiences. If you're a senior, make sure you have your resume, you've dusted off, because if you want to work in government and if you do a good job, staffers come and go, there's probably going to be a place for you. And for those interns. And then we always have a big dinner in Springfield with all of the people that, many of them who are currently working in government that were former interns, with the new interns. So that's a way, again, connecting those interns to the individuals who have gone before them. Builds a great alumni base, and it gives also the current interns something to look at. A path for, when I get done with this, that's the path forward.
You had talked about some of these speakers that Paul had brought in earlier years. Is there anybody that really sticks out in your mind as just was an absolute joy to be able to listen to at the Institute?
Oh,
you can just list off a
Maya Angelou. I mean, I can't say one better than the other. But if you have an opportunity to go by the Institute and take a look on the wall, and to look at everyone from the president of the Senate, Speaker of the House in Illinois, to then having other members of Congress, and then notable people that are in media, people that ambassadors and governors, and just a phenomenal list and a powerful wall. Barack Obama, when he was Barack Obama state senator, having him there, and just so to walk through and look at, and people are in awe when they come to the Institute and they walk through the forestry building, which is where Paul worked himself, and to look at the walls and see the number of people that have graced the halls of campus as a result of him being a connector and bringing them here.
And that is the great connection for this episode 81 of the WTF Carbondale podcast. just an inspiring conversation about staying connected and being a connector as well. Have a good one, folks. Whatever that one may be.